Good morning, everyone. Once you get that marked, you may want to open your Bibles up to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. That'll be a passage that we'll be looking at this morning. You know, a few weeks ago we were studying 1 John, and we couldn't help but notice in 1 John that he talks a lot about loving our brethren. And so while that was fresh on our mind, I did a lesson where we were talking about loving others. And we kind of talked about two underlying principles that God gives about loving other people. And the first of those principles is found both in the Old Testament and then it's repeated in the New Testament. And in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, it talks about that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so Jesus would build upon that and he would say, now listen, loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves, on those two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. In other words, if you follow those, if you truly love God and you truly love your neighbor as yourself, then you will be fulfilling what the law says. So it's big time important. But we made note of the fact that it's not just love others, it's love others as yourself. And so at the heart of that principle is the idea of connecting and identifying with others. It's the idea of putting myself in their place and sharing in the experience that they're going through and trying to value them as I value myself. And when I can get that perspective of somebody, then I'm going to be able to love them as God intends for me to love them. Jesus would say in Luke chapter 6 and verse 31, just as you want men to do to you, do also to them likewise. And that's kind of the idea. Some people call it the golden rule or whatever. But it's really that identification with. What are you going through? What do you need? If I was needing that, what would I want somebody to do? And so that's the first principle. The second is found only in the New Testament. And the reason that it's found only in the New Testament is because it's based upon the example of Christ and the way that he treated his disciples. So in John chapter 13 and verse 34 and 35, Jesus said, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. So the first, love others as yourself. This, love the brethren as Christ loved his disciples. And so we talked a little bit about, well, how did Christ love his disciples? Well, he loved them as family. And he sought that type of relationship with his disciples. That bond with them, a family-type bond. He did whatever was best for their spiritual interest. He humbled himself and served them. He sacrificed himself, literally, for them. That type of love Jesus calls upon us to have for our brethren. So those are two principles that I think are foundational when it comes to understanding the concept of loving others the way that God wants us to love others. Today, what I would like to do is I'd like to build off of those two principles, and I'd like to talk about some characteristics of love and some practical ways in which we demonstrate those characteristics. So I ask you to turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. There's a section in here. All right, what's going on in the book of 1 Corinthians is Paul's writing to a church that is excited about a lot of things spiritually, particularly like spiritual gifts. During this time, this congregation had many in the group that had miraculous gifts. They could speak in tongues. They could perform some miracles. They had prophecy. And man, they were excited about that. And they were pursuing those things. But rather than leading to unity and to them working together, it was actually leading to division, because rather than appreciating what God had given others the ability to do, they were really pretty focused on themselves and what they were able to do in that. And so there wasn't a lot of love. So Paul said, let me show you a better way. I'm glad you're excited about those things, but let me show you something better. And he starts to talk to them about love. And in chapter 13, verses 4 through 7, he talks about the characteristics of love. Read that with me. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So we have around 15 qualities here, 15 characteristics of love that are mentioned here. And I really think that we can kind of group these up and divide them into maybe 3 different attributes. And the first attribute that I want to look at and think about is the attribute of humility. That comes up a number of times in here. You notice that love is not puffed up. I love the New King James translation of that, is not puffed up, and I think there's a number of other translations that use that same language, because that's a very literal translation. The Greek word there has to do with inhaling air. So can you imagine somebody, look how important I am, look how big I am, trying to draw attention to themselves. That's the idea there. Love is not proud. Love is not arrogant. It's not conceited. It is not thinking about, well, how important I am, how big I am, how everybody should be looking at me. And you notice there's another one that is very similar to that, does not parade itself. And so you can just imagine, here's somebody puffing themselves up and then marching around saying, hey, look at me. They have to be the center of attention. What is their focus on? It's on themselves. And what do they think everybody else's focus should be on? On themselves. And I'll tell you, we live in a time, and I don't know, it's always been that way, I guess, because it's so common among humans. But social media and the outlets that we have now to promote ourselves, maybe it's just in your face a lot more, where people are so focused, well, how do I look? What does my selfie look like here? What can I say that's going to draw attention, that I can get so many likes, that I can draw, and it happens outside of social media, obviously. But this mindset of where the focus and of attention has to be on me rather than others. It's very much the idea of promoting self. That's it. Love does not promote itself. And the reason is because that's not where love's focus is. Love's focus is not on how important I am, how everybody ought to be noticing me. Love's focus is really on others. The attention is being given to others rather than to self. And so practically speaking, I would say this. Love is a genuine interest in others. And isn't that very close to humility? Humility is, I see others, and my focus is more on others than it is myself. I notice them, and I value them. So how would that look? So here's a conversation going on. And someone starts to tell a story about something that happened to them. Oh, no. Let me tell you what happened to me. That's not love. Why? Because the focus is, whatever you've got to say, I can top it. I'm bigger. I'm more important. Let me parade my story before you here. So think about, in a conversation, how would humility respond? Somebody begins to tell a story. And there's genuine attention given to that person. There's genuine value given to what that person is saying. There's listening that takes place there rather than talking and paying attention. Now, I'm going to tell you, every one of these attributes that we're going to talk about this morning, I think I find myself falling short in quite frequently. Because if someone were to ask me, Lonnie, do you think you're a loving person? I would say, yeah, I think I love others. But I don't know in conversations whether I always show humility. But I need to. Listening rather than having to be the one listened to. That's one practical application of this idea of humility. All right, so another quality, attribute that's listed here in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, characteristic about love, is it does not seek its own. It's not selfish. It's not demanding. It doesn't have to have its own way. And we've already talked about several passages that have this idea in it. In Romans chapter 12, verses 10 through 13, Paul says, be kindly affectionate to one another in brotherly love, in honor giving preference to the other. In other words, my preference is not necessarily that I get my way. My preference is that I would yield to others in that. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 through 4. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. I think we made this point when we were talking about love as Christ loved his disciples. and how that's different than love your neighbor as yourself. And here's one of those passages. Esteem others better than yourself. Not only look out for your own interest, but also the interest of others. So James chapter 3 is going to use this idea of self-seeking, and then he's going to give the contrast to that. So let's just listen. You don't have to turn there. James chapter 3, verses 13 through 17 says this: Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking, there's our word. If you have self-seeking in your heart, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but it's earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing is there. However, the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and I think here's the contrast, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. The contrast here is there's self-seeking, and then there's a willingness to yield. What does love do? Love has a willingness to yield. It does not seek its own. Love is shown in not having to have my way. As a matter of fact, I give preference to your way, if at all possible. That's what love is. That's tough to do sometimes, isn't it? To have that mindset. Last one in this category, love does not envy. It's not jealous. And I put that under humility because I think that's really at the core of not being jealous, is having humility. Jealousy, I think, the root of it stems from the idea that, now wait a minute, I'm important enough that I should have that. Why are you get to have that and not me? I'm every bit as good as you. I'm maybe better than you. I should be the one that had this raise or this good job or this marriage or whatever it is. Love doesn't respond that way. Love has the humility to see the value in somebody else. And so when good things happen to somebody else, how does it respond? Not, I can't believe that happened to you and not to me. No, it happens. That's wonderful. And I'll tell you, this is such an important principle here, that learning to be truly happy for others. When the Lord blesses a brother or a sister with a high-paying job, and they can afford a nicer home than you, and they can afford a nicer car than you, and they can go on vacations that you would love to go on, but you can't afford to go on. Truly be glad for them. Truly be glad for them. When a brother or sister has good health and their family's doing well and they're excelling in life, truly be happy for them. Don't feign happiness. Truly rejoice with them. We talked about last time Romans 12, 15, and 16. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind towards one another. That idea of identifying and sharing. But let me tell you the beauty of this. Learning to have joy for someone else's good fortune or success or blessings or whatever it is a wonderful, wonderful trait. Because let's think about the fact that you can only have joy for your blessings. Well, then your joy is going to be kind of limited, isn't it? But what if I could have joy for the blessings of everybody? Wow! I could be happy a lot. I could be joyful a lot. And I think that God is saying that's one of the benefits of it. Humility is at the root of it because I see the value of other people. Therefore, I rejoice when other people have good things happen to them. I think it's Satan who says, oh, no. Rather than being happy about that, you should be miserable about that. That's his line. God says, look, I want you to be able to look around and not only take joy in what good things happen to you, but what happens to other people as well. All right. Love responds in that way. It's not puffed up. It does not parade itself. It does not seek its own. It does not envy. Second attribute that I think we can group these characteristics in is the attribute of kindness. It says love is kind, but that's kind of vague to me. That doesn't give me a lot to sink my teeth into there. Love is kind. What exactly does that mean? And someone says, well, it says that it does not behave rudely. Okay, that gives me a little bit more. It's not disrespectful to others. I think that's right. Most of us, our parents taught us not to be rude. Don't say that, that's rude. Don't do that, that's rude. Be respectful to others. Don't demean them. Don't overlook them. Don't be thoughtless towards them. You know, it's rude to open the door as you're going in a building and there's someone right behind you and you just let go of the door. That's rude. Why? Because it gave no thought or consideration to them. We talk about rude drivers. They didn't have any consideration. They just, the way they're driving, it's like they're the only ones on the road. So love responds with that consideration for one another. There's that root principle again. It's polite. It's thoughtful. It has good manners. It does hold the door open for people. It greets people with a smile and so forth. So I was trying to think, practically, what's a good practical application for me about this idea of kindness or not behaving rudely? And I think, except when I'm thoughtless, I think that most of the time, when I'm talking to someone face to face, I try to be considerate. I try to be kind to them. And I'm thoughtful about my words, you know. I don't want to say something that's really offensive to them. But I don't know that I have that same consideration for them when I'm talking about them and they're not there. And I think that's rude too. That's rude too. Because I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me. I wouldn't want them to be considerate of my feelings while they're talking to my face, but then when they're behind my back, they would say things that would be damaging to my character or whatever. I would want them to be polite to me then too. And so with all of these, I was trying to pick out practical ways that we express love for someone and maybe that are more challenging for us. And I think this is one that we maybe need to focus a little bit more on, is how do you talk about someone when they're not there? Be kind. Be polite. Don't behave rudely. And probably the way to do that is imagine what if they were overhearing this conversation? How would they? I'm not saying be dishonest. There are times where you have to say, you know what, this is the situation with somebody. But if they were to overhear this, would I be disrespectful to them in the way that I'm saying this? Would I be rude in the way that I'm saying this? Second characteristic that I think falls in this category is not provoked. I can wrap my mind around that. If somebody provokes you, what happens? They do something that irritates you and you respond to it. You're easily provoked. Some say hot-tempered, you know. I couldn't help it. They pushed their finger in my chest. What was I supposed to do? They provoked me in that. That's the idea. But love is not easily provoked. It's not easily angered. It's not easily irritated. It's not overly sensitive. It's not quick-tempered. Have you ever noticed, apparently I have some driving issues because I keep coming up with driving illustrations, but have you ever noticed how you're driving down the road and you're doing the speed limit, you've got somewhere to be, and there's nobody behind you for miles, and then all of a sudden this Grand Marquis comes pulling out in front of you doing 15 miles an hour on a 2-lane road and you can't pass, and you have to slam on your brakes, and you're driving along, and it's frustrating. Finally, you get a passing opportunity. You go around, and you glare over at the person, and as you get right beside them to glare at them, you notice it's sweet Miss Betty. She's just the kindest person you know. You love Miss Betty. Suddenly, all of that tension that you felt just melts away. Why? Well, because I love her. I love her. And in this provocation that I felt by this person pulling out in front of me suddenly dissipated when I realized, oh, this is somebody that I love. And my countenance changes from gritting my teeth and going on around. And it's okay then. And so I think maybe that gives us some indication how a lot of the irritation that we feel, a lot of that is because maybe our love is not very strong for those people. Because when our love is strong for people, we're not easily provoked by them in that way. in that way. There's three different expressions in 1 Corinthians 13 that have to do with this same idea. Love bears all things, endures all things, love suffers long. And maybe that, matter of fact, some versions translate that. Love is patient. Love is patient with others. Love keeps us from becoming easily exasperated with others. My love for sweet Miss Betty allows me to patiently follow behind her at 35 miles an hour when the speed limit's 55. Because I love her. And so I suffer long in that situation behind her. Now let's go back to this word kind. My understanding is this word that is translated kind in our English Bibles comes from a Greek word that has the idea of being useful to others, to be a full service to others. That helps me. That kind of gives me an image that I can understand what this concept is. Imagine a waiter in a nice restaurant, a nice sit-down restaurant. And this waiter has to come and he has to deal with customers, and he has to deal with all kinds of things from customers. He has to deal with the customer who wants a list of ingredients of each item on the menu, you know. And then he's got to deal with the customer that changes their mind 3 times. And once he writes down the order and starts, wait, I think I'm going to do something. Has they already started on that? I think I want to change my mind again on that. He has to deal with that. He has to deal with the family that allows their kids to play with the silverware. And so he repeatedly has to bring fresh silverware to them because the forks keep getting dropped on the floor. And he has to deal with the person who's impatient and demanding and gruff and all of that. And what would you expect of that waiter in dealing with them? You would expect him to be kind in all of those different circumstances. It's his job, isn't it? It's his job. His job is to be a full service to others, to kindly and patiently do all that he can to make their dining experience as pleasant as possible. That's what he's hired to do. And you would recognize that he should have those type of attributes. That he would speak respectfully, that he would be attentive to their needs, that he would go above and beyond being helpful, that he would strive to resolve any problem that comes up there. Now, if you were that waiter, you may do all of that, and your motive for being kind would be, I don't want to get fired from my job. Or it may be, I want them to leave me a big tip, and so I put up with this, and I'm kind in this situation. But whatever the motive is, you know, the action that is taking place there is really a very loving action. It really is. That desire to be of service looks a lot like love in that situation. I want to help you. What can I do? Can I bring you some more silverware? Of course, if you want to change that order, I'll be glad to accommodate that and make that happen. So here's my challenge to myself and to us. If you're struggling to behave in a kind way towards people, maybe think of yourself as a waiter or waitress for your brethren. How can I be of full service to them? Well, I can be attentive to them. I can pay attention to what their needs may be. I can speak respectfully of them. I can be patient and go above and beyond to be kind to them. I think that's exactly what the Lord's asking us to do. To be a full service to our brethren. To be kind. That's what love does. That's how love behaves. And I put this one in this category as well. Thinks no evil. I don't think, that's what the New King James says. I don't think that's a good, helpful translation to me. Because when I think of thinks no evil, it doesn't think about bad things. But that's not really the idea here. The idea, it's a term that was often used in accounting. It means to keep a record of. To keep a record of wrongs done against me. And you've probably done this. You maybe know people. Man, just at any moment, they can recall all of the things that somebody's done to them. Well, they told me a lie at this time. Well, they were disrespectful. They didn't show up to my wedding. And I mean, they've got this whole list of wrongs that had been committed. That's the idea, that this person is an accountant that keeps up with every transgression that anybody's ever done to them. Love does not behave that way. Love does not react that way. So some translations, and I think a better translation is, love keeps no record of wrongs or keeps no record of evil. In other words, love is willing to forgive. That's the idea. Love is willing to forgive. Love does not harbor bitterness and resentment. Do you ever struggle with forgiving? And I would say the answer for most of us is yes, that's tough for us. All right, here are some things that may be helpful. Really, if you've got a brother or sister and here's a situation and you just keep finding bitterness in your heart, I read an illustration similar to this, but I think this would work. Take a piece of paper, sit down, and write out. John Doe owes Lonnie Oldag this debt. What's the debt? John Doe owes Lonnie emotional damage in the cost of time, energy, and put a dollar figure on it. $25,000 for emotional damage, whatever it is. Here's the wrong that they did to me. Spell it out. Write it down. Whatever the anxiety is, whatever the trust that was lost, the time that was lost, whatever. Write it until you're satisfied with, that's right, that's the debt that John Doe owes me. And then take it and tear it up or burn it. And have that kind of, some type of imagery in your mind of a resolution to this. That's right, they owed me, but what I'm doing is I'm canceling that debt. Sometimes going through some type of extreme process like that helps us to really get some closure on that. And if that doesn't work, then go and reread some passages that you're probably familiar with that are highly motivational in this. I'm thinking of passages like Jeremiah 31 verse 24 where it talks about that in the new covenant, what God is going to do for us is He will forgive our iniquities and our sin He will remember no more. That's what God has done for us in the new covenant in Jesus Christ. And then Psalm 103 verse 12 says, as far as the east is from the west, so far as He removed my transgressions from me. That's the way that God forgives. And then read passages like Matthew chapter 18, where Jesus tells a story of a debtor who begged the one who he owed to forgive him the debt, and he did. And then he went and would not forgive others. And listen to what Jesus says. In this parable, the one who had forgiven the debt said to the one who would not forgive others, I forgave you all the debt because you begged me. Should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant just as I had pity on you? And his master was angry and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was owed him. And now here's Jesus' point. So my heavenly Father also will do to you if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespass. This is serious business. Don't let bitterness remain in your heart. Love can't exist there when that's the case. Find a way to let go of that. Find a way to forgive. Love does not keep an account of wrongs done to it. And you think about, that's a miserable way to live your life. I got to make sure I don't forget these things that people have done to me. I want to remember that. Let them go. Love your brethren by letting go of the record of their wrongs. Third and last category that I want to look at this morning is optimism. And there are characteristics here in 1 Corinthians 13 that I think can only be described as optimistic in this. Love does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Where's its focus? What's it looking for? What's it excited about? Well, it doesn't have some type of twisted enjoyment in evil and misfortune and scandal and conflict. And I think we see that way too often. People want to, that's gossip. That's what gossip is about most of the time. There's some scandal, some misfortune, some conflict that somebody's going through. Oh, tell me more. That's not what love is looking for. That's not the things that love is focused on. Now, love may hear some of those things, but the reaction should be very different. Not some type of tantalizing excitement that comes from that. Love doesn't get excited about bad things. It gets excited about good things. Love is looking not for faults, but for attributes that are positive in people. Love's not focused on the negative. It's looking for the positive. It's not obsessed with everybody's shortcomings. It's looking at the talents and the abilities and the things that people are doing well. Philippians 4 and verse 8, very common, popular verse, and I think for good reason. Philippians 4 and verse 8 says, "Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue, if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate or think about, ponder on these things." That's what love does. Love believes all things, according to 1 Corinthians 13. It's willing to give the benefit of the doubt because it sees the best in others. I do not believe that love is naive. I don't believe that love is naive or gullible. But I believe what it's looking for is the potential in people and in situations. That's what it's looking for. It's able to see the potential because it's focused on that. It believes all things. It hopes all things. Love expects positive outcomes. It expects positive outcomes. It tends to encourage positive results in people because of the expectations that are placed upon people. You ever noticed how we live up to our expectations? What if we were all loving towards each other and we had really high expectations of each other? Not impossible expectations, but we believed the best about each other. We believed that we could grow. We believed that we could do better. We believed that we could, and it wasn't in a critical way, but in a very encouraging way. Can you imagine how that would raise the bar for all of us? If the expectations, but what are the expectations so often? Negative. And we tend to live up to those negative expectations. Love hopes all things. When I think about someone who really excelled in this quality, I think of Barnabas. Remember, that wasn't his real name, that was his nickname. And his nickname meant bar, son, bunus, encouragement. Why did they call him the son of encouragement? Well, because he tended to see the best in people and believe the best about people and encourage the best in people. So Saul of Tarsus, who had brutally persecuted Christians, becomes a Christian. And nobody believes him except Barnabas. And Barnabas takes him to the apostles, investigates. I don't think Barnabas was just naive about this. I think what Barnabas did is said, is that possible? Is the potential there for that? And I think he investigated that, and what he saw is, that's what happened. And so then he takes it to the others who didn't even take the time to investigate that. Do you remember John Mark, who went with Paul and Barnabas on the first missionary journey and then for whatever reason forsook them? The second missionary journey, Barnabas says, let's take John Mark again. And Paul says, no way. No way. And Barnabas believed in John Mark enough that he went with John Mark to other places than Paul went. And it turned out great. Later on, Paul would write about John Mark and say, he's very useful to me. Barnabas was able to see that. Barnabas believed all things, hoped all things. If you want to love your neighbor, you want to love your brethren, focus on their good qualities. See the potential that they have. Expect them to succeed rather than fail. And if you need help with this, pick out a brother or a sister that you struggle to love the way that you know you should. Your love for them is weak. You have somebody in mind? All right, maybe you can flesh this out more some other time. but try to view them in a positive light. And it's funny because sometimes when we pick out somebody that comes to our mind like that, and then somebody says, try to view them in a positive light. You're like, there's nothing. I can't think of anything. I have nothing here. Well, probe a little deeper here. Think about this. What are their strengths? Well, you know, they would help a person out. They would be helpful to somebody. All right, there's one positive action. Can you think of another? Well, they've been really good in the community in a lot of ways. All right, there's another. And continue to build that list. What contributions do they make for the Lord? Well, I know that they're generous. I know that they're generous, and I believe they're probably generous to the Lord's work as well. Well, all right. There's a good quality. What could you encourage them? How could you encourage them to be even better? All right, now we start to think in a different way now, because now we've become not an adversary to them, but we become an ally with them. I want to help them develop these attributes. I think love behaves that way. When Paul says that love rejoices in the truth, it believes all things, it hopes all things, I think what he's saying is it has that type of perspective. It's looking to benefit and to better others. Therefore, it's able to see the potential in others. It's able to recognize those positive traits, and it's able to encourage those traits. All right. Go back over to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, if you've left there. Let's go back and let's read the first 3 verses. Now remember, the situation in Corinth is these people are excited about spiritual gifts. They're excited about God giving them the ability to speak in tongues or to prophesy or to do something miraculous. Here's what Paul says in verse 1. You know, though I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and could understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I'm nothing. And though I bestow all of my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Now look at the conclusion at the end of the chapter. Verse 13. Now abide faith, hope, love. These 3. But the greatest of these is love. You want to work on something that will improve your spiritual life? It'd be hard to go wrong with working on being more loving. And every day we get opportunities to improve in this area. Every day we get opportunities to practice. So let's love. Let's love as the Lord teaches us to love. So in the spirit of love, we offer an opportunity to anyone who could use encouragement or support in following God. We want to help each other in that. So we offer this opportunity. If you have a spiritual need, if you need encouragement, you need prayers, you need encouragement of brethren, come while we stand and while we sing. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.